Hello, welcome back to the book review of In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky. In this video we are going to cover chapter 2. G just said something interesting to Ouspensky. He told him that he is in prison and the only sensible thing what he can do is to wish that he can get out of prison. And I very much believe that I'm also in prison. In prison in regards to my understanding and my frame of reference, my possible frame of reference to the world. And I wonder how I can expand this frame of reference. Another thing which he said is that one man alone cannot come out of prison, so he refers again to the importance of a group. Together it's easier, or a man alone cannot hope to escape prison. And furthermore, he said they need the guidance of a person which is already outside the prison, who escaped already the prison, which can help them. So a master or teacher. But the question which arose here for me was, if everybody needs someone to get out of prison, how did the first one manage? But then I came up with multiple explanations for myself. The first one being that maybe some people are extremely gifted or extremely lucky, or remember something from past lives, and they manage in fact to get out of prison on themselves. Or another explanation which I have is that prison evolved over time in civilization, and prison got more elaborate, more difficult to understand for one, difficult to grasp over the time. Therefore, in the beginning it was easier to get out of prison, or maybe in the beginning there was no prison at all. Well, when I say prison, I mean of course the mental prison. Yeah, maybe in the beginning the mental prison was not so ingrained already in humans as it is today, so it was easier to get out of prison, and that's why the early people managed easier. And there were some who could help then lesser gifted people to come out, and that process perpetuated until today. So that's my second explanation for this. Now we had the reoccurring theme of G making it difficult for his students to attend his meetings, gatherings. He scheduled them on short notice, such that people were already engaged in something else and only few could attain, or he waited till some people returned to their city before they called them to invite them, to make it especially difficult. So this is a recurring theme already from chapter 1. Because he wants to make it difficult for people to get access to his teachings such that they value it more. But in fact, that means, my interpretation, that his motive was to help people understand his teachings better by doing this. So he didn't do it to feel special or anything, but he used it as a tool to help people grasp his ideas more easily, actually, because by doing this, yeah, you know what I mean. Another possible reason I see for him doing this, which is more obvious actually, is just that he doesn't want to waste time with students who wouldn't stay on the path. Yes. That's quite contrary to another school of thought, so it's quite strategical on his part, contrary to the other school of thought where we let life unfold itself and throw ourselves in there, and whatever happens is good. So it's just a different approach, more strategical, more planning approach, which goes well with the left-hand path of being in control of everything. But it could also just be that he does it naturally and didn't think about it. So actually I can't be sure on that one. But I'm leaning more towards the first explanation, because he also explicitly stated that he wants to make it difficult for students in order to assess their value. So now G spoke about crystallization, which means creating something solid in a human. I mean solid personality. And this is achieved through intense struggle, through friction, struggle between yes and no. And this crystallization can happen on different foundations, and he says there are good ones and bad ones, and one must be careful to choose the good ones, because after some level of crystallization it's very difficult to mold the solid again and form something new. And with the bad foundation, he gives the example of a brigand. So some military personnel standing somewhere with a rifle and guarding, for example, anything, just standing there all day for 10 hours, and it's hot and flies are biting him, but he stands there nonetheless and doesn't move for 10 hours. Feet are hurting incredibly, etc. And this leads to crystallization, because he has an intense struggle of overcoming his impulses of sitting down or moving. But he says that this being becomes more or less a solid thing, which is crystallized, but which has very little consciousness left, if any. I don't know now if... Did he say consciousness? Yes, he said consciousness. I don't know now if also with the good crystallization a being doesn't have much consciousness left. Which I would instinctively see as a disadvantage. And what he further says is that a crystallized being may live in an astral body, and he says that not everyone has an astral body. This is a mistaken belief, he says, and only through crystallization can one get an astral body, and with this astral body it lives on after the physical death of the person and is able to reincarnate again. Or if it doesn't reincarnate, it will die after a time, even though this astral body is not immortal. He doesn't really judge whether he thinks that crystallization is now a good or a bad thing, but I would assume he's seeing it more as a good thing, and would assume that he is also, trying to achieve or has already achieved some level of crystallization. So I think that this is the goal to a certain extent of his teachings, to achieve crystallization. We now get to know G's affinity for carpets and carpet making in the traditional form, where he describes that big groups of all ages come together to make carpets, accompanied by music and dances, and everyone plays a role in the process. So separation of work, like you have with Henry Ford. specialization, I mean. And then Ouspensky got the idea that maybe G wants to tell him with his stories that there is an important connection between music and the resulting carpet, its form, its colors. And I also very much believe that rhythm and music and mathematics play an important role in our lives, and I'm curious to find out more about the workings of said things. So then G answers P. Ouspensky's question. Ouspensky's question is, why is this knowledge, this high knowledge, not shared with the masses? Why is it kept secret? And G gives two kind of contradictory reasons. In the first answer, he says that knowledge is not kept secret, but that it's actually easily accessible for those who are able to receive it, to understand it, who are prepared in a way such that they can take it in. So this is the first answer. And his second answer says that knowledge is something physical and thus bound to physical laws, and thus there's only a certain quantity of knowledge in circulation. And he says that if large quantities are distributed among few people, it is of great use, but if small quantities are small quantities are distributed among many people, so everyone receives of the share equally, but only a small amount, then it's of no use. It's like painting some statues with gold, but you have much more statues than you have gold to cover all of them, and so you need to cover only a few statues with the amount of gold and don't cover the rest. At least a few statues look nice, but if you were to try to cover everything, on every statue would only be a small patch of gold, and therefore they would all look worse than before. Then he explains that the events of war and destruction release large quantities of knowledge from people such that it becomes available for collection. And I said in the beginning, those two statements statements are kind of contradictory, those two explanations. And now I forgot why they are contradictory. Let me think about it again. Yes, they are contradictory for me because the second one implies that if someone gives knowledge to somebody else, they lose a certain amount of their own knowledge because it's a fixed amount. But the first one states that it's not kept secret. I mean, the second one would then also imply that one wouldn't be really eager to share knowledge because it would lessen their own knowledge. But maybe you can get around it by sharing it only in a small group, and this group together will not lose any knowledge then, and that's why also you have to guard the group and only invite few people who are worthy. But let's keep that aside for now. So the second one means you're not really eager to share your knowledge because you would lose something yourself by doing so. But the first one, he said, it's actually if you're ready to understand the knowledge, it's easy for you to gain access. But you can only gain access if somebody shares. But nobody wants to share because they lose knowledge. So that's why it's a bit contradictory for me at the moment. Another point I want to make in regard of this is that for me it seems a bit dangerous that one thinks that war and catastrophes release large quantities of knowledge ready to be collected by you, because if you are after knowledge, it would mean you would have to incite wars and catastrophes on purpose to gain and collect higher knowledge. So we have to think about that also. I want to stress that, or remind myself that I won't get thrown off by contradictions somebody makes. We don't know if G says contradictory statements on purpose as to serve as another filter to filter out the worthy students. So a little contradiction here or there, or even a large one, will not directly throw me off to listen further to a person. It's also quite possible that it seems only contradictory from my current understanding, from my current point of view, and I will always, for now, I will generally assume that if something is contradictory, it's because of my limited understanding. Of course, I have to be careful to make the distinction between somebody who knows maybe contradicts themselves on purpose or has no other way of contradicting themselves by speaking the truth, and those guys who contradict themselves without noticing it. So the important difference is to make the distinction between one who contradicts themselves and is aware of it, and one who contradicts themselves and is not aware of it. Of course, we can also learn something from a guy who contradicts himself and doesn't notice it, but only as a case study for ignorance. And I have to be careful as to not become arrogant. So now G explained the 4 bodies a man can develop, and each body is built on top of the other. So there are 4 levels. With each level built, the consciousness can operate more effectively. Man starts out with the first body, which is called the carnal body, and when man only possesses the carnal body, he is slave to his impulses. His actions are governed by his impulses. In the second body, which is the natural body, by the way, the 4 bodies are called differently by different schools. So the second body, which is the natural body, one becomes master of his emotions or impulses. With the third body, which can develop when the second body has developed, man can acquire additional skills, and the third body is the spiritual body, and the fourth body is the divine body, which again can develop when the third body has developed on top of the second and the first, and it can influence and is in control of the 3 bodies below it and also of its own body. So that's true for every of the 4 bodies. And he likens this to the process of chemistry. He explains this by saying that let's let's imagine a vessel filled with different metallic powders, and the arrangement of these powders is easily changed by tilting or moving the vessel. So there's nothing permanent. The tilting or the moving are the external influences, and they decide the structure and arrangement of the different powders. When we begin to develop the second body, that means that the powders will get heated by a fire such that they merge together to one compound alloy. And the process of creating this fire is through friction, which is generated through struggle to overcome impulses. So when this is one compound, we are said to have developed a second body, and this will possess certain kind of chemical or physical properties, certain conductivity, for example. But now we want to develop the third body and add more properties to this alloy, for example, radioactivity. I now can't remember other examples, but we want to add additional properties, so acquire higher knowledge, so to say. And there are ways of imparting those properties, and when we are at the point when the alloy can no longer hold any more properties, we want to, then the third body is developed, but there's a problem now. The properties can be taken still away through the same means as we are used to impart them. So we have to develop the fourth body, which will seal the properties and make them, the alloy, unchangeable. And this he describes as becoming immortal. And he states that this is basically the goal of any school, to achieve immortality one way or the other. What is interesting is, I draw the association to, or I ask myself, what role does current development in technology play in this? Transhumanism. Keyword is transhumanism, which also goes exactly in this direction of achieving immortality, but through means of technology. So we can upload, or we can connect our consciousness to, let's say, the cloud or the Internet of Things, and we can upload our consciousness and impart it maybe on different beings download it again on different beings and thus live on, or on different even machines. Maybe we get an entirely inanimate body, a robot. What's the word? Yeah, let's say non-biological body, an artificial body, and thus achieve immortality. Or through cloning, let's say, where the consciousness can live on from clone to clone. With cloning, we could even achieve immortality with a natural or almost natural body, biological body. And this is also, I would also regard as technology, cloning as technology. So that was just a thought connected with this mentioning of immortality. And what I now don't understand what he exactly means by immortality, if he means that your consciousness lives on forever, one way or the other. That means if you could remember also previous lives, but then we also have to ask ourselves, what role does time play? Because if time is just an illusion and also only relevant for this, for our experience, what does it mean to become immortal? But this can be part of another video, maybe. Topic of another video. Or yeah, so I hope I will find out more about what he means by immortality in the future chapters. So an important point which I forgot is also, so when we only have the first body dictates all our actions, and the fourth body is associated with free will, but even a person who only possesses the first body can appear to be developed, because impulses can incite desires in him, and if he has strong desires, he might be able to focus on a goal in a direction for a long period of time, even though that was not the result of his strong will, but it was the result of his strong desire. Whereas when you have developed the fourth body, he describes that one really has free will, and by exercising his free will, all the other lower bodies will align themselves to follow his command of the fourth body. That means his thoughts will fall in place with his will, his consciousness, and in turn his desires will also fall in place along the same direction. And finally, his body and bodily functions will obey the emotional powers and desires which were created by the third body, which got his impulse from the fourth body. So that's a very interesting differentiation to make for me, because there are many people who seem to be very strong-willed, but it could very well be that this is just the case because they have strong desires for whatever reason. Maybe they have such a strong desire because they fear to lose something, or maybe they have formed such strong desires because of the fear to become irrelevant. So that's an interesting consideration. So I want to give an example to illustrate my last point. So there was also a period in my life where I strived very hard, where I tried to achieve very much, but the reason for this was my desire to get recognition by others. Well, by my friends, by my colleagues, by my parents. So that's why I had a strong desire to achieve something. And this strong desire gave me fuel for staying productive and trying to achieve, and it also works, but it was for the wrong reason. Yeah. So I think this example illustrates the point better. And I said it also works, so we could ask, then what's bad about it if it works? But the problem is that we probably can't develop the higher bodies as long as we don't see our motivators, where our desires sprang from. Will probably be a hindrance in developing the higher bodies or attaining the higher knowledge. We now heard about, I now read about the 3 ways which lead to immortality. The first one is the way of the fakir, the second one the way of the monk, and the third one the way of the yogi. First one, fakir is someone who, for example, stands on one foot for 20 years and the way of the yogi, the way of the monk, well, the monk renounces everything which world has to offer and focuses himself single-mindedly on his God. He is devotional and obedient And the yogi is the way of knowledge, is the way of study and intellect, and the yogi tries to achieve the fourth body through knowledge. But what G said is that all three ways are not enough. The first one starts on the first body, on the physical body. The second one on the second body, on the emotional body. And the third one, the way of the yogi, starts on the third body. But at the end of, let's say, the 20-year period, the other two bodies, so for the fakir, the third and the second body will be underdeveloped. That's why he still can't make use of his first body. And for example, the yogi cannot make use of his knowledge because he hasn't developed the first and the second body. Right. But all the three ways aim at immortality, but I don't know even for myself if I want to achieve immortality or what does it even mean. Currently, I just want to understand and learn. So my current goal is not to achieve immortality at the moment. Now he also spoke of a fourth way, which spoke very much to me, which appealed very much to me. It was basically all I asked for. In the fourth way, you don't have to leave your current circumstances and make a drastic life change. So leave everything behind, go to a monastery, or leave everything behind and just stand on one foot, or leave everything behind and enter a yogic school. But you can start out on the path from where you're currently at in your current circumstances. And in the fourth way, you are doing only what you understand. And this also makes very much sense for me. The requirement for the fourth way is the wish for understanding. So understanding needs to be the first motivator. And that's actually exactly what my motivation is. So I'm a bit relieved, so to say, that I don't have to leave everything behind to gain higher knowledge. And then he said something which I didn't quite understand, if it was to be taken literally or metaphorically. But he said on the fourth way, the fourth way is very efficient. The most efficient one, in the first way, the fakir needs 1 month of physical torture to achieve the same result as the monk would achieve in 1 week of devotional prayer and renouncement, who would achieve the same result in this 1 week as the yogi who would meditate or study for 1 day, who in turn would achieve the same result in 1 day that the guy on the fourth way can achieve in an instant just by preparing a pill which contains all the substances which will produce, if swallowed, the desired outcomes. So now I don't know if this is to be taken literally or metaphorically. I guess it I very much assume it must be taken metaphorically, but I guess we will find out by reading further on. I mean, by just taking a pill which will reveal everything to you takes out a bit the beauty of discovering. But that might just be me not ready for this radical and efficient way. Maybe I'm not yet developed enough to receive this knowledge in an instant, even though it would be possible. So if a guy would approach me with offering me, by taking this pill, to gain what I want, achieve the highest knowledge, I'm not sure if I would wanna be ready to take it. I mean, we now don't care about the fact that this is shady and could be dangerous, but let's assume this guy was genuine and only wanted my best, and he would offer me this pill. I would probably currently not take it, because I now have a romantic understanding of discovering the truth, and I don't want this romantic idea be taken from me. And because of the unknown, because now I know at least that the search for knowledge or understanding is exciting and not too bad for me. But if I take this pill and achieve my goal of knowing everything I ever wanted instantly, it's probably the fear of not knowing what then comes. So this would be too a drastic change for me. So I believe, I'm under the impression I want to a bit gradually approach towards this wisdom and not get it in an instant. But this basically only strengthens G's argument that actually knowledge is easily accessible to those who are ready to take it. If we look now carefully at my case, it seems I'm not quite ready to take the highest knowledge, which is also a bit a pity, but I will think further about this after the video. Alright, so finally so we are now on the last page of the second chapter. G made a few remarks. One of them was that all evil results from unconsciousness or missing awareness about one's actions. This very much resonates with me. Another thing is that he mentioned that man can become stuck, trapped in his current thinking by going in circles, believing in the illusion of cultural progress, when in fact, at its core, humanity is still the same, just in nicer clothes. So basically he says we still have slavery and violence today, just more hidden and disguised. And by failing to realize this, one thinks that we in fact made great progress as a civilization, and this assumption of course limits or hinders their further spiritual development. I think we will leave it at that for the second chapter. And is there anything else I want to say? No. Let's leave it at that, and see you for the third chapter in the next video.